technical name. So when I'm talking about this cannon, we'll just call it our 6-pounder. What about this cannon weighs 6 pounds? Ball, yeah, exactly right. Call it a 6-pound gun. It'll be able to fire a solid cast iron 6-pound shot just like this one with a full load of gunpowder. This cannon can fire this ball about a mile, about to the shores of Round Island out there. At that distance, the very best cannon crew in the whole world would expect to hit a target about the size of Round Island out there. It's not too terribly accurate at that range. The maximum accurate range is close to half a mile. It's about the end of the stone break wall in the harbor there. At that distance, the very best cannon crew in the whole world can expect to hit a 100-foot stationary target about 1 out of every 3 shots. So even then, not too terribly accurate. To make matters worse, Niall and I are not the very best cannon crew in the whole world, I'm sorry to say. We represent soldiers who would have been stationed here in the 1880s. There were only infantrymen at Fort Mackinac at the time, no artillerymen, and even by then, this model 1841 cannon is a 40-year-old antique. So the Army sent Fort Mackinac a 40-year-old, wildly inaccurate cannon to men who are not trained to use it in combat. It should tell you something about the military significance of Fort Mackinac in the 1880s. We're the headquarters of a national park. National parks very rarely need artillery to defend themselves. Nobody expects the Canadians to come swarming over the border and attack Mackinac National Park. So even though there is much more modern, breech-loading rifled artillery that can throw a shell accurately over several miles, we don't get it here, simply because we don't need it. The most we're using this cannon for, just like today, is for ceremonial purposes. Firing off cannon salutes every morning when the flags go up, every evening when the flags go down. Really any and every excuse we can think of to shoot this cannon. The soldiers would have taken it, because shooting cannons is cool, even in the 1880s. Even back then, there are people coming to Mackinac Island, coming up to visit the fort, visiting our track, going downtown and buying fudge. And while they're on the island, they expect to see a cannon go off, just like they do 130 years later in 2015. So we'll fire off one of these cannon salutes for you. Now, usually they send up a crew of 3. See, we're a little bit short-staffed. You'll need a volunteer. Yes, sir, the blue. You can just come over the rope.
When was the last time they actually fired a ball out of it?
1814. As British soldiers shooting at American ships. Okay. What's your name, sir? Paul. What hand you write, Paul? Right? All right, give me a left hand. Right on. Cover that up nice and tight. Paul here is our new chief safety officer. What he's doing is called thumb stalling. By covering up the hole in the rear of the cannon, he's preventing any airflow from going through the bore. That air could stoke up any sparks or embers still in there and send them into Niall's face. We don't want that. So Niall's going to start cleaning out the cannon. We'll take our gunner's worm or auger, just a big corkscrew on the end of a stick. That'll hook out any solid debris that's left over from the last cannon fire. That debris could still be smoldering and will also prevent us from ramming our charge all the way home. I was going to take our next tool called the wet swab, just a big dirty sponge, dunk that in a bucket of water, and send that down the bore. That'll extinguish any sparks in there in 2 ways. First of all, we're introducing moisture, that should be obvious, but also because of Paul's thumb stalling, we're pushing out all of the air, creating a vacuum. And that nice thump, as he pulls it out of the bore, is the sound of a vacuum collapsing, all the air rushing back into the bore. It means that any sparks or embers still inside have either been drowned by the water or suffocated by the vacuum. And we are now safe to load. So Paul, you've done a bang-up job as Chief Safety Officer. Relieve your duties. Thank you so much, sir. Well done. Congrats. We haven't lost anybody in days. It's been great. Now, we are ready to load. Niall's taking 3 ounces of gunpowder. That is a little bit historically inaccurate. In the 1880s, it would have used 10 ounces for a salute charge. But that scares the horses. They don't let us do that anymore. Today we only use 3. And he's ramming that down using a curved safety ramrod. Another historical inaccuracy. In the 1880s, they would have used a straight ramrod. That also would have put Niall's chest directly in front of the muzzle while he's tamping down on live gunpowder. So I hope I don't have to explain why we use a curved ramrod today. Now there's 1 step left before we're ready to fire, and that's priming the cannon. So he's going to take a small brass vent pick called the gimlet, ram that down the touch hole Paul was just covering. That'll tear open the powder charge and expose the black powder inside to our ignition device, which is one of these brass friction primers. Just a small brass tube filled with very fine gunpowder. At the tip here we have a substance called fulminate of mercury. It's the same kind of thing you find in the head of a match. When this pin is pulled, it's just like striking match. It sends a small jet of flame down the tube through the touch hole, igniting our cannon salute. Now it looks like we are just about ready to go. Now would be the time to cover your ears and get your cameras ready, whichever is more important to you. And with that, there are 2 commands to fire this cannon. They are ready, fire!
No gunpowder. Okay, let's go to lunch.
Now, if you have any questions for Niall or myself,